right, so today we are in Darkness and Light, Part 14. Yeah, woo! Okay, Darkness and Light, Part 14. And we are continuing our journey here. We're getting closer and closer to the end. You must know that to be true since we're already in 1 Peter. And so there's only so many books left before you get to the end of the book here, as we've been kind of going through this chronologically. And so I want to go back to 1 Peter. I know we covered chapter 2 quite a bit last time. I do want to go back and read some of chapter 1 for the context for chapter 2 so that we understand what has been being dealt with here, okay? Because I think that one of the things that is so vital that is missing in a lot of the teachings that have been out there that you've learned all your life is the strength of context. Making sure that somebody is going to take the time to give you the strength of the context so that you really understand the impact. When the verse says the main point, why should it be so impactful? Because it's a part of a context leading to that point. So, now we've been looking at darkness and light, and we've been specifically understanding it now from the point of view of how we as a people, okay, we were talking about authority. We've talked about, in the past, we've talked about how darkness and light have to do with a place that's deliverance and refuge and safety and life and light, and hidden and dark and waiting for something to be illuminated in darkness, a place devoid of actively useful light and all those kind of things. Then we talked about, in more detail, this idea of authority, submission to authority. Darkness was no authority or wrong authority. Light was Elohim's authority. But now we're being in these verses here that Peter's been talking about and some of the other ones here at the end, it says things like, for example, he says, you were once, in darkness, but he called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. That's 1 Peter 2:9, right? So he's talking about us being a people called out of darkness. So now it's actually a status that he desires of his whole people as a people, that we would be in the light, all right? So don't worry about so much, I'm saved, I'm this, I'm that. No, are you in the light or are you in the darkness? Okay, because the people are called out of darkness into his marvelous light. Not just any kind of light, but his marvelous light. I mean, think about what marvelous is. Light that when you're in it, you would marvel at how awesome it is. Okay? Not just like when we say, oh, that's marvelous. No, but understand the idea of marvel, that you would marvel like wow. Okay? That's the kind of light that it is. Okay, that would impact you in that level where you're just in that awestruck place in his marvelous light. All right? So all that we read here, and we go back to chapter 2 for a second, had to do with putting aside all of the things of the darkness life. Deceit, hypocrisies, evil, verse 1, envyings, evil words, all these things to come and seek the unadulterated word. And that's how we come out of darkness into light. And so all of this is in the context of chapter 1. So let's go back to chapter 1. So we know from verse 1 and 2, we covered this last time, that this is being written to the chosen, verse 2, according to the foreknowledge of Elohim the Father, those that are set apart by the Spirit unto obedience. Okay, that was the reason that we were set apart. Okay, again, you wouldn't get that quite as much if you just had the word holy. Those who are holy made holy by the Spirit. Because that sort of just feels like a status. It's not a status from that point of view, it's a functioning. He functionally set you apart from something for a purpose. Okay? So like if you have a bowl full of, let's say, raisins and nuts, and they're mixed together, you can separate them, right? And by separating them, you didn't just say their status, you are separate. Okay? You literally have to take the one out of the bowl and move it into something else or move them apart so that they're no longer together. They are separated. Okay? So he says they were separated onto what? Onto obedience. Now, we're an interesting sort of separation because at the same time that I gave you this very clear example of physically, literally taking us to be separate, we now have this sort of challenge of how do we do that, yet we also fulfill what Yeshua said, which was, I do not wish to take them out of the world, but that they not be of the world. Okay? So now what he's saying is, okay, well, you kind of have to stay in the bowl, but you cannot desire to be the other thing. Okay? You're supposed to be a raisin, not a nut. I thought about that for a second. Which way did I want to go? I like that way. Okay. All right? Okay? So, but you're supposed to be separate. All right? So, but we're separated for a reason, and that reason is to be obedient. Okay? He didn't just separate us for like quarantining health reasons or some other thing. He expects obedience. All right? He doesn't expect it from everybody. He expects those that have been set apart to be obedient. All right? And we were set apart by the Spirit unto obedience and the sprinkling of the blood of Messiah. Yeshua, favor and peace be increased to you. Verse 3, blessed be the Elohim and Father of our Master Yeshua Messiah, who according to his great compassion has caused us to be born again to a living expectation through the resurrection of Yeshua Messiah from the dead, to an inheritance incorruptible and undefiled and unfading, having been kept in the heavens for you. All right, so let's understand what he's talking about here, because we get a little bit of a struggle with that born again thing too. Look, in verse 2 of chapter 2, you're supposed to come at this whole thing as, in metaphor, a newborn. Okay? So when he says born again here, he's referring to this theme of picturing starting fresh, like a newborn babe. It's not the born again that Yeshua was talking to Nicodemus about, because Nicodemus and Yeshua are having a completely different conversation about born again. He's talking about when we change from the corruptible to incorruptible. He's talking about a whole different level. Remember, these things are not one-time events per se. They're cyclical events. They can happen over and over. You probably need to go through this born-again thing, I don't know, at least every couple of weeks, every couple of months, as you realize, I got to bury the old man, come and put aside the evil and the deceit, the hypocrisy, all the stuff in chapter 2, verse 1, and then reapproach this again as a newborn. Okay? Seeking the unadulterated milk of the word. So here, just because we have to be careful, just like in English, here in this conversation, Peter is using a concept the way he's using it. That doesn't mean that everybody that uses it is using it exactly the same. So be careful with that. The Nicodemus conversation is not this. This is part of your journeying in the flesh. Yeshua is talking about the next level. And if you're not sure about that, I have a little mini teaching. I think it's called Picking on Nicodemus or something like that. Okay? So you can listen to that in focus. So just realize this born again thing is not like just because you came to believe in Messiah, that now makes you somehow this new born again thing. Okay? And people use that phrase in Christianity all the time. He said he caused us to go through a rebirthing in our thinking, in our hearts and in our minds, to a living expectation, because that wasn't part of where we were before. And we talk about in Ephesians where it says that we were strangers of the covenants, separated from without Elohim in the world, when we were of the world and Gentiles, and our thinking and our behaviors, and not being set apart, not being covenanted. But here he's saying, look, your whole thinking, your emotions, all that stuff has been like a restart. Like a reset button, so that you can start again, because now you have a living expectation through the resurrection of Yeshua Messiah from the dead, so that you have now become aware of an inheritance incorruptible and an undefiled and unfading, that is undefiled and unfading, having been kept in the heavens for you. So that thing is incorruptible, that thing is unfading, it's there. Now the question is, you as a newborn babe, just like you did before, will have choices to make. You'll have to make decisions. In other words, whatever path you've been on up to this point, you'll now have an opportunity to recognize that you can change the path. You can choose differently. But it doesn't mean that you're going to still make all the right choices. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to end up where he's describing here, where the inheritance incorruptible is. But it means that now you have an opportunity, because you've now been you get that restart, you started over, and now you have an expectation that you never had before, which will give you the motivation to make different choices. Understand? All right? So bear in mind, again, blessed be the Elohim of the Father of our Master Yeshua, who according to his compassion, okay, this is the unmerited, he's allowed you to have that beginning place. You didn't do anything to earn that. That's the salvation provided by Yeshua. He gives you the opportunity to wake up and make different choices and start again. However, that does not change the fact that you now have an expectation, if you are set apart unto obedience, that you should have that expectation. Of course, if you're set apart unto obedience, you should have every expectation that you're going to end up in the incorruptible inheritance. Of course, if you don't obey and do your part in this, and don't make the effort to be weaned on the unadulterated milk of the word, etc., that we have in chapter 2, then, remember it says, if indeed you have tasted the master's good, drawing near to him, so you've now tasted of it, and now you draw near to him. What if you don't draw near to him? Do you still get the incorruptible inheritance? Nope. Okay? The blessing, though, is that you are now aware that you can have an expectation because you can start again. So you expected, when you got old enough to look at your life, man, I deserve death. I don't deserve anything. Why would anybody want me? Look at the dumb stuff I've done my whole life. And then Yeshua says, that's okay. You can be born again. In other words, you can hit the reset button and start over. Okay? Don't look at it as a status of saying, I'm a born again. That means that somehow that's a permanent status. You may need to go through that again when you realize that you're still doing dumb stuff and you haven't really cleaned it up. It's the idea of going back. You might want to go and get immersed again. Not for the whole covenantal part of it, just for what mikvah was all about. You recognize that you're dirty, you need to be cleaned. It's a status change. That's one of the only places there really is a status change, from unclean to clean. You have a status of tameh, you want to be tahor. Okay? And so here we have this idea of, according to his great mercy and compassion, has caused us to be born again to a living expectation through the resurrection. So we come to understand that because of Yeshua's death, burial, and resurrection, we can have an expectation of this opportunity to participate in an inheritance that's incorruptible, that's undefiled and unfading, that's been kept for us in the heavens. Okay? This you have to kind of get this in the right way. We're redefining our lexicon. All right, so you got to understand what the phrase born again is all about. And in this case, Peter's talking about, just think of it as a fresh start. You're getting to turn the page and start again. You got a fresh page, you're a clean slate, all the metaphors you want to use. Okay, I don't care which one works for you. This is what he's trying to say, that through Yeshua, you can have, on a daily basis, the opportunity to make teshuvah, to repent, to turn around, and to start as a born-again new person. That's what he's talking about. So you probably thought you were doomed because of your life, because of your choices, and now I'm just stuck with all the results of all the things I've done up to this point. I'm stuck with it. There's no going forward. I blew it. And a lot of you out there have a very defeated sort of attitude and mentality because you feel like, well, why would he love me? Look what I've done. Look what I'm still doing. How could anybody love me? Look at, Well, he says, wait a minute, in his great compassion. He didn't just say in his compassion. It takes a great compassion to overlook all the dumb things you did. And he has a boundless capacity for compassion. And he's very patient. But he's not going to compromise. You're going to have to set yourself apart by the Ruach unto obedience. And then you can have the expectation, follow the order here. Then you can have the full confidence and expectation through the resurrection of Yeshua to the inheritance incorruptible and undefiled and unfading that's laid up for you and waiting for you in the heavens. Okay? And by the way, it's been kept in the heavens for you doesn't mean that you're going there to get it. Revelation 21 says it's coming here. Okay? So it's being held there at the moment. But Revelation 21 shows it coming down from the heavens to the earth here, where we will dwell with him forever. Okay? Verse 5, who are protected by the power of Elohim through belief for deliverance ready to be revealed in the last time. So follow this. You are set apart unto obedience. You are expecting this inheritance through the resurrection, and this inheritance is incorruptible, undefiled, and you are protected by the power of Elohim through belief. See, if you don't believe, which means you're not doing this separated onto obedience, you're not trusting, then you'll have no expectation of any of this stuff. He says, you are protected by the power of Elohim through belief. You need to understand what belief means. You believe something up here in your head. You can then believe it also in your heart. And if you can hold those two long enough together with a strong enough emotion, your actions will manifest the belief. The manifestation of the belief is called obedience. And that's what he says you were set apart towards. You're set apart for the purpose onto obedience. And you're protected by the power of Elohim. People will just stop to say, I'm protected by the power of Elohim. No. You're protected through belief. Without belief, there's no protection. Those who were laid low in the desert coming out of Egypt, why were they laid low? They lacked belief. Now, those protections that they would have thought, well, he brought us out of Egypt. You know, he redeemed us. He delivered us, all the stuff. They didn't get the inheritance because they failed in the unto obedience part. Okay? It's very simple. Just look at the story, look at the account, and see what was the element that caused them not to be in the inheritance. The land is the metaphor, literally and then figuratively, for the future of the kingdom. Taken out of the world, Egypt, and brought into the kingdom, the land. And what determined who got there? Obedience through belief. That's why only 2 of the 600,000 men over age 20 got to go. Because they had belief obedience. So think of it as belief obedience. So that if you're going to be those that are set apart, now follow the flow, those that are, have the expectation through the resurrection, etc., you then are protected by the power of Elohim through belief for a deliverance ready to be revealed in the last time. Did you catch the phrase there? The deliverance now. Does it say that? No. So he's not telling you you're going to be delivered now, and he's going to fix everything now for you, and everything's going to be wonderful now. He says, this is for a deliverance ready to be revealed. An ultimate deliverance he's talking about, because he's linking this to the inheritance incorruptible. You see, the world is still in darkness. Until the world gets Yeshua to come in full glory and power, until all things are set right by Revelation 20 into 21, and death and sin and everything else is thrown into the lake of fire. And then the light that then shines on the planet will be the light of Elohim. It says it very clearly in there. There is no need of sun and moon, etc., etc. The light, this is the light that was first in creation in Genesis chapter 1. Let there be light. That's day 1. Let there be sun, stars, and moon. That's day 4. Okay? So when we talk about darkness and light, he's saying, but you have to be lights in a dark world. You are called to be a light in a dark world and not be hiding your lamp in a basket. He says, who are protected by the power of Elohim through belief for deliverance ready to be revealed in the last time, in which you exult, even though for a little while, if need be, you have been grieved by manifold trials. In other words, yes, you're not seeing it yet. Yes, you're suffering through some things now. Yes, this is not going to be easy immediately just because you came to realize there was a Messiah and there was a covenant and all these other things that you decide that you're going to trust and believe in and come in line with. He says, I'm sorry, but you may have manifold trials that can cause grief while you're waiting on the deliverance that is ready to be revealed. But don't lose your belief and don't lose your hold on that. Because in verse 7, he tells you why that is. Even though you exult in this, he says, look, be careful you get all full of yourself. Oh, I'm saved, and I'm this, and I'm delivered, and I'm in, and I'm a child of the living Elohim. He says, yeah, but wait a minute, you're still going to have lots of trials. You know why? Because they're there in order that the proving of your belief take place. Listen to the baptism of fire teaching. I'm sure we covered this verse in there. Because it says it right here in this one verse, exactly what we're talking about. In order that the proving of your belief. So how do trials prove your belief? Because in the trial, you're going to make decisions. You're going to take actions, or you're going to not make decisions and not take actions, and that's going to demonstrate what you believe. And this is in order to prove your belief, and that proving of your belief. See, this is part of the problem that we come to this from unfortunately, from the mainstream of Christianity's mindset, which is he's going to do it all for you. He's already done it all for you. There's nothing really for you to do. Well, Peter doesn't understand that because he says that it's more precious than gold that perishes and proven by fire, this belief that can come through the proving grounds of trials. This is the value. And so be careful when you pray for Father to take away all your challenges. First of all, he's not going to. Because it goes against his plan. He says these are there to prove your belief. This is why, like even during prayer time today, we talked about, some people said that I made a commitment to go in a certain direction and then doors came open. Yes, he will help, he'll provide, but you still have to prove your belief. You got to take the first step. He's not going to help you till you take the first step. You draw near to him, he draws near to you. Okay, verse 4 of chapter 2 says, drawing near to him is what you do. If indeed you have tasted that the master is good, you draw near to him. You have to make your steps. Now, he poked your bubble, opened up your mind, stirred you up and disturbed your peace, and now you have to take the next step. You have to ask, seek, knock. You have to go towards him. And he's going to put you through these fiery trials. He says, back to verse 7, in order that the proving of your belief, more precious than gold that perishes, and proven by fire, might be found to result in praise and respect and esteem at the revelation of Yeshua Messiah. So what does that mean? It means that when he sees you, he's going to say, well done, you good and faithful servant. That's what it's talking about right there. It's going to result in hearing those kind of words. I saw what you went through. I saw your struggle, and I saw how you stood firm. You cling, you cleave, you hold fast. There's a teaching that you might want to write down, good teaching to listen to. Also, well done, good and trustworthy servant, another teaching to listen to. Baptism of fire, we mentioned that already. Because you want to hear those words, those well done words. But that only happens after you've done something. How many of you have ever had a child or seen a child do nothing and then want to get all smiley face stickers for that and be all proud of them and say, but you didn't do anything. You don't get that just for existing and being cute. You do something, somebody might be proud of you. Or you choose not to do something that you know you shouldn't do and you didn't do it, and so somebody could be proud of you. It's an obedience thing. Parents are proud of their children when they're obedient. When things that you've told them, they actually understood it, they actually took it into their being, and they walked it. And when they walk what you instruct, you're proud of them. Whether it was instruction to do or not do. This is no different than you and your Heavenly Father. He instructs us. When you take his instruction into your being and you walk it out and you are doing in obedience and trusting his instruction will bless you, keep you safe, change you, and etc., he's proud of you. And he's happy to give you the inheritance incorruptible down the line. If you can maintain that, now we have another teaching to mention. He who endures to the end, right? Endure and receive the crown of life is the name of the teaching, I believe. It doesn't happen till the end. He says, and he who endures till the end shall receive all these things. What are you enduring? Trials that are there to prove your belief. That's what it says right here. That's what you're enduring. Because it says you have been grieved by these manifold. No, grieved means it's a struggle. It causes pain. By the way, growth often is painful. I mean, that's why we even talk about it as a child. People have growing pains. Literally, it's in that phrase, right? You're growing and it hurts. But growing pains doesn't just mean like you went through a growth spurt and your body is literally, the bones and muscles are hurting a little bit because they're not prepared for all that growth. But what about the spiritual growth? What about the character developing growth? That hurts too. Sometimes a lot more, okay? All right, so back to verse 7. So he says, if you do these things, it can result and it would result in praise and respect and esteem. Don't you want to see Yeshua look at you and say, I'm proud of you, but also I respect your journey. I respect the effort that you put in. I have respect for the strength inside that you went through what you went through and came out still clinging and cleaving and holding on. And so he wants to then share his honor with you. He says that he will result in praise, respect, and honor. And we talked about that in the honor and shame teaching. There's another one. How that honor is transferable from him to you. But you have to earn that. I know that's like speaking blasphemy to everybody who's still got Christianity mindsets. But Scripture is all about what you don't have to earn and what you do have to earn. His great compassion gave you the opportunity. You did nothing to earn that. He gave that to everybody, did that for everybody. The reward that's incorruptible, the inheritance incorruptible, that you have to earn through belief, through your actions, through showing through trials that you will not waver, that you'll not quit, but that you'll hold on and keep going and going and going forward and forward and forward. He says here that it would result in praise and respect and esteem at the revelation of Yeshua Messiah, whom, having not seen, you love, in whom you exult with unspeakable and esteemed joy, yet not seeing but believing, obtaining the goal of your belief, a deliverance of lives. So again, people want to read this as a done deal. None of this is about a done deal. He says this is a revealing that will be revealed in the last time. Oh, but we're in the last times now. Every generation thinks that. Maybe we are, maybe we're not. So what? He said, but you're doing these things because that which you have not seen you love, and you exult in, and you have unspeakable and esteemed joy, even though you don't see, you believe. We talked about this a little bit earlier today. It wasn't on the teaching, but during our just prayer time, etc. That you are demonstrating, as is always necessary in every belief in a higher power, that you must do it in a faith-based way. Because none of the religions of the world, none of anything can point to anything out there that actually is living and breathing and functioning that's a God. All of the ones that point to things that they can point to are stone, wood, glass, whatever they are. And all the ones that believe in what they can't point to are believing in an invisible something. That takes faith. Whether it's a false something or a true something is not the point. It still takes faith. And he's saying here, look, you are going to need to have a strength. You already have, you don't even realize how much strength you have because you already believe in something you can't see. He says you have, having not seen, yet you love your Creator. And the people Peter's talking to, they haven't seen Yeshua. Yeshua's already been dead and resurrected to the people he's talking to. He's one of the ones who saw. Most people didn't. I know there was 3,000 here and 5,000. That's a very small number of people relative to the people that were in the land. He says, but having not seen, you love, in whom you exult with unspeakable and esteemed joy. You're like, I'm just so blessed, and you're exulting, and you're just, he said, but doesn't that take faith? Yet not seeing, but believing. And you're believing what? That the obtaining of the goal of your belief, a deliverance of lives, is what's laid out there for you. But look at it, it's the goal of your belief. It's not the substance of something you already have. The belief's goal is to get you to, that's what a goal is, a future event. So the goal of your belief in that which you do not see, and you exult in and you love, and you have you can't even put words to the joy, etc., is in the ultimate result of the goal is that your life will be delivered. That's the inheritance incorruptible that you are holding great hold of that expectation. That's the only way that you can get through the struggles of this world. And I don't know how people do without it. I understand why most of the world is on, depression drugs and everything else, because they, not the ones that just have mechanical, chemical. I mean, there are people that just cannot cope with the fact that there is no hope. And really, without this, what hope is there? So you're going to die at some point, that's the end of it. That's what they understand. And so why would going through this be worth anything if that's all there was? Look, I want to say something, I don't know, that you could take it any way you want. But I'll tell you this, you need to have such a strong belief deep down that you need to understand that even if none of this was true, your life is measurably better believing in it anyway. Why? Because without it, you would just have death in front of you. There'd be no hope, no reason to get through the struggle, no expectation of anything. So why even struggle if you know it's futile? Because that's all, everything is futile. I mean, Solomon says life without all that is chasing after wind. I mean, it's just nothing. So you might as well put all your effort into this, not only because it's true, just because what's the alternative? To just futilely live life knowing it's of no point? But we have an expectation. We have a hope. You've also tasted of the master. So you don't have to go to if it's true or not. You know it's true. You've tasted of the master. But I'm talking to those of you that are coming from nowhere and are still struggling. How do I believe in something that have you tasted of the master? And maybe you have and don't even realize you have because you're too stubborn and too miserable to even see how much the master's already done in your life to protect you from ultimate demise and some horrible things. Oh yes, horrible things happen to you, but you survived them. Those things could have killed you, ruined you, wrecked you, but here you are. And your life is changing because you've tasted of the master. But you have an expectation that others do not have. Because they just know you might as well eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. And so if you're struggling, the manifold trials that you're struggling, how would you get through those things? And you know people out there that are struggling and miserable because they have no hope or expectation. By the way, this happens in the body too, because there are people in the body whose belief is weak and they sit there still in worry. And I counsel people all the time who are still absolutely 100% yielding to that spirit. The spirit of fear and doubt, have no victory in their lives. I don't want to sound all Christian when I say that, but you need to have victory in your life. You have to have victory over that mindset that defeats everything. That defeated mindset. Now, I'm not saying victory like you've won the game, okay? If you're in let's think of this as a long tournament. Not like one with 32 or 64 teams. We're talking say with thousands and thousands and thousands. You have to go through tier after tier after tier eventually to the winner. That means you have to have lots of victories to get to the final. But you're defeated. Every little battle you need to be looking at, I need to just have victory here. And that'll give me the energy, the excitement, the motivation to go forward knowing I had victory here to go to the next one. And build on it. And so look for those victories. You've had some already. Otherwise, you wouldn't be sitting here. None of you would be sitting here if you have not tasted of the master on any level. You didn't just randomly show up and say, hey, that looks like a building that might be cool to go to on a Saturday and spend 6 hours. And so you recognize that there's a choosing. He chooses you and you choose him back. And that you have been set apart through that choosing and through your choice. Remember, it takes both. He chooses you, you have to choose back. You have to accept the choice. And that you have chosen to accept that setting apart onto obedience. Okay? Now, it's by the Spirit. Don't misunderstand that. Listen to the teaching on understanding the Ruach, understanding the Spirit. The kids are like, man, he's mentioning so many teachings. I got to write these all down. Okay? Understanding the Ruach. You have to understand. You already are submitted to a spirit. Spirit of man, spirit of the father, the spirit of the enemy, Hasatan, the spirit of disobedience, the spirit of fear. There's lots of spirits out there. It's an intrinsic nature, whatever one you're feeding at. Which one are you being, nursed on? What milk are you drinking? Is it the unadulterated word, which is a spirit of a sound mind? Or are you drinking, and nursing at the breast of fear, doubt, whatever that is? Remember, it's talking about that you are a babe drinking of the milk. Think of it not just like we think of a baby bottle. They didn't have baby bottles back then. You were literally suckling at the breast of something. This is where you were getting your protection, your sustenance. Well, are you doing that in the unadulterated word? Or are you doing it at some other thing? You could be doing and suckling at Mystery Babylon, the mother of harlots. You could be doing any of these things. But it's manifest by what? Your actions. Are you afraid? Are you worried? Are you doubting? Are you trusting? Are you believing? Are you confident? These are things that, and not just at the moment, but what is your nature? Have you become a fearful person, a defeated person? Not at a moment, because the moments start to add up and then it becomes your intrinsic nature. And then you end up in darkness. Let's bring this back to darkness and light. There is no fear in the light. There is no insecurity in the light. There is no doubt in the light. Those are emotions in the darkness. Because it's when people are in the dark, children experience this. They're in the dark, they want a light on, to leave a night light or something. Because in the darkness, they're afraid. There's unknowns. It's scary. In the light, they're always like, I can see everything. I'm okay. So your mindset could be one of darkness or light. He says, look, you are called out of darkness into his marvelous light. That was back in chapter 2, verse 9. So out of the fear, out of the doubt, into the belief, into the confidence, knowing that these trials that you go through are there to stretch your belief muscles. Some of you understand the benefit of exercise. I still haven't lost any weight since I joined the gym. Apparently, the membership itself does nothing. I went once, I will say that. Okay. All right? But see, okay, so I believed, I'll bring this up again because I think it makes a good point in this teaching. I believed that the gym, if I was that working out, that being a member of a gym would help me get in better shape. I believe that. But see, if I never go, if I never take advantage and use the equipment and stuff like that, my belief that a gym would help me get in shape is nothing. I know I took one step, I joined. A lot of you believe that a gym will get you in shape and don't even bother to join. Okay? But of course, joining doesn't do any good either if I don't attend. And walking in the building and taking a little stroll around it and then walking out doesn't do any good either. You got to do the work. You got to put in the effort. Oh, but that sounds like work, salvation, blah, blah, blah. You know what? Enough of that already. Go listen to Are You Saved? And learn the relationship between faith and works and salvation. How there's a linkage between belief, faith, and works. Okay? How that all integrates together. Because think of it the same way as in shape, as opposed to salvation, right? In shape is related to my belief in what's going to help get me there. Am I actually taking the actions to actually get me there? So there's works. The result I want is to be in shape. The result I want is to ultimately be in the end of days delivered into the inheritance incorruptible. The result, whatever it is you want, is going to take a belief in how you get there and then the actions that are the work of getting there. Okay, it's not that hard. Whatever it is you want, you have to believe that there's a path to get there, and then you actually have to do the things necessary that are part of that. It's as simple as that. We overcomplicate everything. Oh, but salvation is a free gift. Well, because without that, none of that stuff you do is going to matter anyway. Yes, he has given you the opportunity to live forever for free. So you get that as a starting point. The one part you can't do yourself, he did it for you. But it's of no use to you whatsoever without belief and action. It has zero value. It assures nothing. It provides nothing. It's nothing. Oh, that's going to go all over the internet. Rabbi just said salvation is nothing. No. It's nothing for you if you don't do anything. It's everything to you if you do something. I mean, he may as well have not done it if you do nothing with it. I mean, think about it. I mean, he went through the most horrific death so that you could have a potential to live forever, and then you do nothing with it. Because you'd rather stay in darkness. Remember, part of darkness is this idea that you think you're in the light, but you're in the darkness. Because we talked about that, how Hasatan and his angels, his demons can look like angels of light. So you're sitting there thinking you're in, you're basking in the light and sunshine, but you're sitting in utter darkness. That's how delusional we become. Because we buy into those false worldviews and reality views. We're not living in reality. Okay? Most of us spend a lot of time not in reality. We filter what we see, what we hear through all of our emotional filters, and we are not getting the truth into our system. Anybody ever jump to a wrong conclusion? You know exactly what I'm talking about. That whatever information you saw, you heard, or whatever it was, went through your filters and ended up in the wrong place. Because you didn't have enough information, but that didn't matter to you. You jumped to a conclusion anyway. And so recognize this as we're going through this. He's trying to tell you, Peter's trying to make sure you understand that you start off as a babe, and now we're in chapter 2, and he explained all in chapter 1 why we have to start as a babe, because you have an expectation of obedience and all these other things. We have this a desire to be focused on and love that which we haven't seen. We're doing all these things, and yet we're who we are right now, and who we are right now can't get there. We got to die to self and start again as a newborn babe. It's the only way to get there. And a newborn babe comes what? Out of darkness into light when they are born. So it's a great metaphor. Okay? He says here, again, so whom having not seen you love, and whom you exalt with unspeakable and esteemed joy, yet not seeing, but believing, obtaining the goal of your belief, a deliverance of lives. Concerning this deliverance, the prophets have sought out and searched out, prophesying concerning the favor for you. Oh, so the prophets didn't receive all this. Of course, Hebrews 11 tells us that everybody hasn't received all this yet. They all died having not yet received the promises, the things they expected, because it's not until the end. It says it here. It says, these are the deliverance ready to be revealed in the last time, verse 5. He says, the prophets, having sought out and searched out, prophesying concerning this favor for you, searching to know what sort of time the Spirit which was in them was pointing out concerning Messiah. Oh, they had the Spirit in them. Look at that. Pointing out concerning Messiah when it was bearing witness beforehand the sufferings of Messiah and the esteems that would follow. So the prophets knew and were pointing out this first manifestation of Messiah, how he would come and suffer, and what would follow. To whom it was revealed that they were serving not themselves but you in these, which now have been announced to you through those who brought the good news to you by set-apart spirits sent from heaven, into which messengers long to look into. Okay, so he's saying, look, they knew this was for a future time. They were speaking this for you because this stuff has happened in your lifetimes. This phase of the prophecy and what was supposed to happen has happened in your lifetime. And it was revealed that they were not serving themselves. In other words, it wasn't going to happen in their lifetime, but was going to happen in a future lifetime. Okay? But notice he said, which has now been announced to you through those who brought the good news. So realize the good news has to be in some way related to what the prophets said would be coming. Christianity wants to tell you the good news is that there's a Messiah that came and died and was resurrected. That's really good news. And it is part of this good news. He tells you right here that it is part of the good news. But the rest of it, the main body of it, is what the prophets said was coming. The prophets foretold these things, and it included the eventual restoration of Israel in Ezekiel and Hosea and other places. Peter in chapter 2, quotes from Hosea. We read that last time about who were once not a people, lo ami, and now are the people of Elohim, who had not obtained compassion or mercy, lo ruchama. but now obtain compassion. For those of you who took the test last week, children, it's lo ami is not my people, lo ruchama, not compassion, okay? Or no mercy, all right? During atonement, a lot of times we sing the song rachem, or mercy. So lo ruchama, rachem is the root. It's mercy, compassion. And so here he's saying, look, this is part of the good news to you by the set-apart Spirit that was sent to tell you. Now, he says, now we get to the meat of this. Verse 13, therefore, because of everything I just said, you're set apart unto obedience, you have an expectation, you believe in the invisible, that which you have not seen, with great love and expectation and overflowing joy. He says, and this good news that's been sent out, the prophets had sought it. It didn't happen in their lifetime. It's been for you to understand. He says, therefore, because of all of this, having girded up the loins of your mind, it's got to start in your brain, in your head. You got to gird that up. Okay? If you don't know what that means, think about when people didn't have the clothes like we have now. They would literally take like a cloth that they would wrap around their waist and gird themselves up and tighten it up to hold everything in place and together. They would gird themselves up. And so that means that they took something to wrap something and bind it up nice and snug and tight. So here they're girding up the loins. Again, picturing what a girdle or what girding up means. The loins of your mind. Your mind doesn't have any loins. I mean, but he's giving you the point. It needs to be something that you are wrapping and protecting and guarding. Encasing in something that holds it all together properly. So he says, gird up the loins of your mind, being sober. Sober means living in reality. Don't be all drunk on your own desires and your own way of seeing things and your own pet doctrine, your own whatever. Just, you know what, be sober. Realize you're not necessarily the smartest person on the planet. You might need to learn something from somebody. Okay? Set your expectation perfectly upon the favor that is to be brought to you at the revelation of Yeshua Messiah. So now, hold on. He's again saying, stop thinking when you heard the word born again earlier in chapter 1 and verse 3 and these other things that it's happened already. Everything he's talking about is about something that hasn't happened yet, but you're in the process of preparing for. He says, gird up the loins of your mind, being sober, set your expectation. And we told about the expectation of the incorruptible inheritance. Set your expectation perfectly upon the favor to be brought to you at Yeshua's return, at the revelation of Yeshua Messiah. Also, the favor to be brought to you as he reveals himself as the living Torah, as he reveals himself as the light, as life, as the way, as the truth. That's going to bring favor, merited favor. And some translations might say, maybe the expectation perfectly upon the grace that is to be brought. But you expect to receive that favor because you're doing something. Everything about chapter 1 up to this point is about what you're going to do, including girding up your mind. Now you're doing this in verse 14 as, obedient children. Obedient children. Sitting back and letting Messiah do everything. No. Not conforming yourselves to the former lust in your ignorance. Not doing all these things that you used to do. Big capital D-O letters, do, but doing different things. Yeshua instructed things. Yahweh instructed things. The Father instructed things. As obedient children. Remember, he told you that you were chosen according to the foreknowledge set apart by the Spirit unto obedience. As children, we're going to find out more about newborn babes in chapter 2. We already read that last week, right? Not conforming yourselves to the former law. So you are reborn, and you're not going to keep acting like you did before. He said, because you did that in your ignorance. We have other places where he says, we wish you not to be ignorant. Paul says that in many places. I wish you not to be ignorant. You have to be informed. So don't do these things. We did all these dumb things because we didn't know. How many of you, I don't know, you have to raise your hand, but a lot of you, when you've talked to me in the past, have said, I did all these things, I didn't know better. I said, good. Repent of them, stop doing them. I mean, that's the whole point is don't be all owning defeated attitudes and depression because you did these things. Move forward to the commitment not to do them anymore. There's also a bunch of stuff that you didn't know you needed to do that you hadn't done, that you need to do. And so this is where we start making better decisions. He said, not conforming yourselves to the former lust in your ignorance. Instead, as the one who called you is set apart, so you also should become set apart in your, in all your behavior. See, now, I think Peter's confused because he doesn't understand. Once saved is always saved, and I don't have to do anything, and there's no works here to be done. And really? You need to become set apart in all behavior. Now, I challenge a Christian to define what that means without the Tanakh, without the Torah. How do you set yourself apart in your behavior? You can't without the Torah. The Torah tells you what that looks like. It's kind of the whole point. Verse 17, and if you call on the Father, who without partiality judges according to each one's work, pass the time of your sojourning in fear, knowing that you were redeemed from your futile way of life, inherited from your fathers, not with what is corruptible, silver or gold, but with the precious blood of Messiah as a lamb unblemished and spotless. Okay, so here we go. He says, look, if you're going to call on the Father, and he judges fairly across the board, no partiality, he's going to judge each one according to what you do, not according to what someone else did. This is why I tell you, you got to own it. Stop blaming your mother, your father, your pastor, your rabbi, whatever. You own what you do. Nobody made you do anything. Now, maybe stuff was done to you. Well, that's not your responsibility. But the things you did it. Oh, but you don't. No, it doesn't matter. You did it. Own it. Move on. Maybe you were too weak wherever you were in terms of in your ignorance, whatever it was that you did things and you had no idea or you allowed things. Fine. Own it from the point of view is like, not own it like take the blame. Own it says, okay, I have the power to make different decisions now. That's what I mean by own it. Say, yes, whatever the conditions were, I made those decisions. I can make every excuse in the book. It doesn't matter. Own that you made the decisions. Stop pointing the finger at everybody else, because if you own that you made the decisions, then you also own that you can make different ones. Now, I'm not saying there wasn't circumstances that made it really hard to make any other decision than the one you made, but I'm saying, but if you own that you can make a different decision, I can put a gun to your head and tell you do A, B, or C, and generally speaking, you would probably do anything I say. Or you could choose to let me pull the trigger. It's still an option. Maybe not a good one, okay? Because some of you think, oh, but I didn't have a choice. Well, you did. You just didn't like the choice. But now you're in a different place. Now you recognize that you have help. You have a resurrected Messiah. You've got understanding of a vertical relationship. You're in covenant. Now you shouldn't be afraid of the bullet. You shouldn't be afraid if they pull the trigger. Because, see, now you have an expectation and a hope. All right, you can kill my body. I'm not worried about that. I got a better place to be eventually. A resurrected place where none of this nonsense is happening, and likely you won't be there. Okay, you go ahead and pull that trigger. This will probably be the last time I ever see you. But that person might not be there because of that kind of place that they're in. You see what I'm saying? So, he says, look, having girded up the loins of your mind, being sober, set your expectation perfectly upon your expectation. But by the way, you don't just get to have expectations of him. He's got expectations of you. That's called a covenant. We talked about that for 55 parts. Okay, go listen to it. Are you covenanted? And understand that he has an expectation of you. And you have expectations of him. But his are unconditional, yours are conditional. In other words, you can't expect from him if you don't do. Okay? Now, if you do, you can expect from him. is if then. If you, then I. That's what the Father uses all the time. If you obey my voice, I will take you as my people. I will protect you. I will bless you. I will make sure that you have abundance at all times. Right? He says here, he says, the Father who judges without partiality according to each one's work, he says, pass the time of your sojourning in fear, not contradicting anything I already said. This is fear of Yahweh fear. Okay, if you don't know what that is, this isn't the insecure, worried fear. This is the awe-struck, high reverence, I don't want to disappoint him fear. Okay, go listen to fear of Yahweh for that. Okay? Knowing that you were redeemed from your futile way of life, inherited from your fathers. Please own that verse. I mean the part that says, not the redeeming part. Everybody wants to own that you were redeemed. Forget that part. That part has no value to you if you don't recognize that your way of doing things was futile. Do you understand what I'm saying? His redeeming you had zero value if you're going to go on thinking that you knew what you were doing. And you still are going to try and stay sitting on your own self-sovereign throne. You have to recognize your way was futile. Futile. And that you were redeemed out of that. He paid a price so that you would now be able to realize your way is dumb, your way is futile, your way doesn't work, so you can let him rule and reign in your life. That was what you were supposed to understand. Knowing that you were redeemed from your way. Now, why did you need to be redeemed? Because the futile way of life was going to lead to death. That's why it's futile. Not futile because it didn't lead to abundance or your bills being paid or having whatever car you wanted, whatever. No, futile meaning that at the end, you were just going to be dead. In other words, this whole life was a waste of time. But if you can have the expectation, if you can now walk in the walk and do the walk that he teaches you to do, and not just talk the talk, but believe and trust and be obedient, then you're not in a futile state anymore. Now you're in an expectation of the inheritance incorruptible. He says, look, you were redeemed from that. You weren't redeemed from the law. You weren't redeemed from the Torah. You weren't redeemed. He says, from your futile way of life. That's the law of sin and death that reigned and ruled in your life, the way that led to sin and death. The law in your members. That's what Paul's talking about when he talks about the law of sin and death. The law that led to sin and death. The Torah leads to life. Righteousness and life versus sin and death. Okay? But you weren't redeemed with the corruptible silver and gold, but with the precious blood of Messiah as a lamb unblemished and spotless, foreknown indeed before the foundation of the world, but manifested in these last times for your sakes, who through him believe in Elohim, who raised him from the dead and gave him esteem, so that your belief and expectation are in Elohim. So all of this was signs and wonders are always there to strengthen your belief in something. Generally, when we do it in this world of what we're talking about religious-wise, it's to get you to believe in a particular God or creator. This in particular says that you will now believe and have your expectation in Elohim himself. You recognize that it wasn't stone or rock or any other man-made thing, but it was Elohim that did these things. Who through him believe in Elohim, who raised him from the dead and gave him esteem, so that your belief and expectation are Elohim. Now that you have cleansed your lives in obeying the truth through the Spirit, to unfeigned brotherly love, love one another fervently with a clean heart, having been born again. Now he's talking to you that if you've made this choice, if you've died to self, if you've covenanted, if you've been set apart unto obedience, now you can say, having cleansed yourself of the futile way of life and all this other dumb stuff that you were doing through obedience. He says, now that you've done it in obeying the truth through the Spirit to unfeigned brotherly love, if you have done these things, then love one another fervently with a clean heart. Having been born again. Yes, you are born again through this process. However, you may still grow up to be the same, whatever you want to put the expletive in, that you were before. So what'll be the point? Be like deja vu in a bad way. What's the point in being born again? Only to grow up to be the same whatever you did before, or some version of that. He said, but if you're going to be born again in obeying the truth through the Spirit, he says, then love one another fervently with a clean heart. Because having been born again, not of corruptible seed, but incorruptible. Because remember, he says that you had inherited this feudal way of life from the inheritance of your fathers. In other words, you inherited it generationally through the behavioral patterns of the people that came before you. But you are now inheriting a different lineage. You are coming under a different birth, one that's incorruptible. And through the living word of Elohim, which remains forever. Let's say it again. Now that you have cleansed your lives in obeying the truth through the Spirit to unfeigned brotherly love, love one another fervently with a clean heart, having been born again, not of corruptible seed. What's the corruptible seed? He goes back to verse 18, knowing that you were redeemed from your feudal way of life inherited from your fathers. So not of corruptible seed, but incorruptible through what's incorruptible? The living word of Elohim, which remains forever. Yeshua, the Torah, the truth, the way, the life, the light. Because all flesh is as grass, and all the esteem of man is the flower of the grass, and the grass withers and its flower falls away. But the word of Elohim remains forever. And this is the word announced as good news to you. The Torah, Yeshua, the light of the world. Go listen to that teaching, Yeshua, the light of the world. And understand that this is, like he's saying, look, everything is like the grass. You know what? It lives, it dies, it withers, it goes away. But not this. This is forever. You're going to live and die. You can be expecting the incorruptible inheritance, and you may receive it, you may not. Depends on your choices. That's all in your hands. You have full control over that. You can choose to be in one place or the other. You know, it will not be any different in the future than it is right now. I'm going to say something that this is reality, okay? I'm going to say this again tomorrow when I do the finance class, but you are exactly where all of your choices have taken you. Own that. You are not where you are because of that, well, my mother, my father, my sister, my brother, my dad. No, you are exactly where your choices are. Now look, if you're like a little kid, that may be different. You have no choices, you have no control. You're an adult and you've been an adult for more than 5 minutes, you are where your choices have taken you, your decisions, your actions have taken you. Your financial state, your relationship states, your spiritual state, your health state, all of it is really where your choices have taken you. Oh, but wait a minute, don't forget that some of this stuff it's like a slow burn. Some of this, when you start having health issues in your 50s and 60s, some of that's the stuff you did in your 20s and 30s that accumulated and eventually started having an effect. Some of this stuff only affects you in small doses that accumulate over time, and then by the time you finally get to that age, when it comes to like health things, relationship things. So same thing he's saying here, look, you can choose to be like the withering grass, own your own self-sovereignty, and then you're just going to die. Or you can get off the throne, start suckling on the unadulterated milk, be born again, make different decisions in line with the word of Elohim that is forever, and you can have an absolute expectation of an incorruptible inheritance. Amen? Amen. Let's pray. Father, we come before you, and we are just so blessed to know that there is a path to the incorruptible inheritance. We so appreciate Messiah's willingness to go through the death, burial, and resurrection process so that we could have an opportunity at life. And so, Father, we do want to be the children that come out of darkness into your light. We do want to be the children that are going to have a fear of you that's appropriate, not a fear of everything. That we will be able to have the ability to be rejecting and releasing all of the futile ways of life we had before, recognizing that the whole point was to redeem us from that. Those foolish things that we did that we thought were going to get us what we wanted to go or get us where we wanted to go but didn't and will not and cannot. Father, help us to focus on the actions that follow the love we have for you, the unseen. Help us to take the actions that follow the unspeakable and esteemed joy that we have for you. Help us to have the strength of belief to take the action so we can obtain the goal of the belief we have, which is deliverance of our life into the incorruptible. Father, we are weak vessels, but we also know that the strength that we need, which flows from you, is sufficient, or you would not have called us at this time. And so, Father, we thank you. We praise you. We appreciate your patience. We appreciate your compassion. We appreciate your mercy and your love as we struggle through these things. Help us to truly embrace that we should not just be grieved by the trials, but recognize that the trials we have are there in order to prove our belief. And that ultimately we would be found that these things will result in praise and respect and esteem when Yeshua comes. So, Father, we want to thank you. We want to praise you. We want to give you all honor. In the name above all names, Yeshua Messiah. Amen. Amen.